Gittin Daf, we begin with the two dots several lines deep into the Daf. The Gemara is discussing the concept of Breira. The Gemara is going to analyze the concept of Breira and see how it applies. I have a question as to whether it works in Gittin. The Gemara is going to try to differentiate between two types of Breira situations, see if we can distinguish between the two, and then prove that we cannot. So just a reintroduction of the concept of Breira. Breira means where something is set up where it is not clear at the time what it refers to. However, it's going to be revealed later what it refers to. Can we say that even though at the time that we set it up or that we created it, we don't know exactly what it's referring to, since we find out later, it works because that's what it was referring to all along. So the Gemara is going to discuss whether you say yesh breira, that means that works, or ein breira, that does not work. So the Gemara begins with a question. Rav Hoshia asks Rav Huda, what if somebody says to a sefer, write a get for whichever one of my wives leaves the door of the house first? It means they both had the same name, so there's no difference in how the get looks. Which of his two wives is it referring to? So he says, write it now at the time for that one. We don't know which one it is, but you're writing it specifically for that one, not for the other. We just don't know yet who it is. And when she comes out of the door, it'll be revealed who it was written for. So the question is, does that work? Is that count as the Shema? So the Gemara says the answer, and I said you could see from our Mishnah that does not work, because the Mishnah clearly said that if somebody says to a sefer, write a get for the wife which I am going to decide who it is, that's no good. You can't use that. So you see, Breira does not work. It's the same concept. We revealed later who I had in mind. Breira does not work as far as again, therefore it doesn't work in your case also where she can come out of the door. Now, the Gemara is going to have kashas on this. The Gemara's first kasha is that we do see that there is a concept of Breira. Where do you see that? So the Gemara has a brisa. If somebody says to his sons, I am making a carbon Pesach for the family, but it's only going to include me, myself, and whichever one of you gets to Yerushalayim first. And they all run to Yerushalayim. So the brisa says whichever one gets to Yerushalayim first, as soon as his head and the majority of his body is within the gates, he is the one who wins the race. He is included in the carbon Pesach, and that it adds, and everyone else is included as well. He is Mizakeh. He includes all the other brothers as well. So you see here, there is a concept of Breira, was at the time that the person had in mind, he made the carbon set up, who was included in the group, whoever was going to be the one to get there first. And we see that it works. He is the one that is included. So obviously the concept of Breira, it works. So the Gemara answers, this is not real Breira. This is not really what's happening over here, that he only had in mind that one son who gets there first. Actually, he had in mind all of them. The only reason that he said this, the only reason he set up this race is because he wanted to encourage them to rush. He wanted to give them motivation to get there first. But really, he had in mind everybody. And the proof of that is that it says that it includes everyone. In the end, everyone's allowed to partake of it. Now, he's Mizak everyone else with him. How can he be Mizak everyone else with him? The simplest understanding is that the brother who gets there first arrives, and he says, I'm sharing it with everyone else who arrives after me. But he can't because it's too late. Because the halacha is, he can only get included in a group of people involved in a carbon while the carbon is alive. Once it's shechted, he can't be added to the group, and he cannot be removed from the group. The Gemara brings a brisa that expresses that clearly. So then, how could these other brothers have been added to the group by the brother who got there first? Obviously, they couldn't. The only way that works is because the father must have had everybody in mind in the first place, and the race wasn't real. So the Gemara have another brisa which proves that this must be the case, because the brisa shows, if you read the brisa further, it says that at the end, the girls ended up getting there before the boys. So the brisa says, so you see that they were zirizos, and the boys were lazy, but it doesn't say that they weren't included in the carbon at all. They really were. So obviously he had everybody in mind. Now, the Gemara introduces another kasha here from Abaye, and this is where Abaye is going to try to separate Breira into two categories. Abaye says, what is it that is going to determine, what is going to reveal which wife, or whatever it is, whatever the case is, which circumstance, what it was actually being referred to all along? In the case of the get, which wife is the one that the get was being written for? Is it the person himself who set it up, in this case the husband, or is it something which is revealed by other circumstances beyond his control? Those should be a big differentiating factor between the types of Breira. Abaye calls it Teilu b'das atzmai or Teilu b'das acherem. It's up to him to decide later, or it's up to something else to decide later. It's very logical to say that if he's the one that's going to be deciding later, you can't say that this, when he decides, it reveals all along that this is the one that was meant to be all along, because he obviously at the time didn't know. So he didn't know which one it was going to be, because he said whichever one I'll choose later. Therefore, it can't refer to the one who's going to decide later because that choice has not been made. It doesn't exist. However, if it's dependent on something else happening, so that other thing that was going to happen could have been set up in advance, or it could be that he's referring to that thing. He has Gemir Stas. I'm referring to that thing, whichever it's going to be. So, therefore, it's much more likely that if it's something that's dependent on him to decide, we should say ein breira. Something that's dependent on something else, some external factor, we should say yesh breira. Now, the question that was initially asked is Talei B'das Acherim, because it was the get which is written for the woman who's going to come out of the door of the house first. That was the original question. The Gemara tried to answer that from the cases where he says the one that I'm going to decide, which is B'das Atzmai, and over there it's ein breira. So by asking, you shouldn't be able to prove from Talei B'das Atzmai to Talei B'das Acherim. Then we even go further, says Abai, we ask a kasha on this entire discussion from the case of the Korban Pesach. That's Talei B'das Acherim. Again, that's more likely to be yesh breira. So how are we asking from there? Why is that yesh breira not prove that there's always yesh breira? That's different. That's Talei B'das Acherim. So therefore, that's a Abaye's kasha. And the Gemara answers that you don't have Tanaim who differentiate. The Gemara says, Rava wants to say, maybe you're saying that these two categories of breira are different. Maybe they're not different. Maybe whoever holds of breira holds it, whether it's das atzmai or das acherim. Whoever holds of ein breira says the same thing, whether it's das atzmai or das acherim. So the Gemara says you can propose that, but it's not factually correct, because there are Tanaim. I'm going to show you two Tanaim who hold of breira in the case of Talei B'das Acherim and not in the case of Talei B'das Atzmai. What are the two who hold of this? So the Gemara is going to quote Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. The case of Talei B'das Atzmai is, the Gemara brings that first. They're in the same Mishnah where it discusses breira, which is Talei B'das Atzmai. And that is the case, the Gemara calls it a brisa, somebody who buys a barrel of wine from Kusim, and he wants to drink some of it, and he doesn't have a cup, he doesn't have anything to take off Trumas and Maasros. He has to take Trumas and Maasros off in order to be able to drink from it. What should he do? So the Brisa suggests the following things. The machlokes is whether this works or not. The Brisa says, let him say as follows. Let him say, when I get home, I'm going to take some of the wine off. So whichever two, let's say the barrel was 100 lug of wine. So whichever 2 lug I take off to be truma, so I'm making it truma now. Which 2 lugin are they? I don't know. They're in here somewhere. When I take it off when I get home, you'll see. Now the 10, that's meiser, and the 9 that I plan that I will take off, that's meiser sheni, because there's 90 left, and therefore meiser sheni is 9 lug. So, and then I'm mechel, that is I make chulin that 9 lugin, because I can be attacking that now, so I can be mechel it now on a coin that I have set aside for that. So will this work? Then he can drink whatever he wants, because whatever he's going to drink now is obviously not those lugin that he's going to separate in the future. So Rabbi Meir says it works. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon all say it doesn't work. So you see here that both Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon say ein breira. This is a concept of breira. Now, where do you see that? And of course, this is Talei B'das Atzmai, because he's the one who's going to take them off. Now, where do you see Talei B'das Acherim? Where do you see that they do hold of breira and Talei B'das Acherim? Someone quotes a different Mishnah for Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that if somebody writes a get for his wife and says it's going to take effect after I die, if I die from this sickness, it should take effect from now if I die from this illness. So what is her halachic status as long as he's alive? And we haven't decided yet, we haven't figured out yet whether he's going to live or die from this illness. So Rabbi Yehuda says she is an Eishes Ish for all inyanim, and when he dies, the get is chal. That means for now, nothing happened. When he's going to die, then it'll be hovrar, then it'll become a get. So you see he's saying yesh breira, and that of course is Talei B'das Acherim. It's not up to him to decide whether he's going to live or he's going to die. Now, where do you have Reb Shimon? So Reb Shimon is in a case where somebody wants to marry a woman with Kedusha's bia. So he says we're going to do a bia now. And this bia should be chal Kedushin, but of course I want your father's agreement, so only if your father agrees. So if your father turns out agreeing to this, then this is l'shem Kedushin. If it's not, then it's l'shem whatever it is. So is this going to work or not? So the Gemara quotes a brisa that the Tanakama says that it works even if the father does not agree. Shimon ben Yehuda says the name of Reb Shimon that it only works if the father agrees. The father does not agree, then it does not work. So again, that shows the concept of breira, and that's of course Tele B'das Acher. So here you see both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon differentiate between Tele B'das Atzmai and Tele B'das Acher. So the Gemara rejects this. The Gemara says no. The case of the barrel of wine, the reason that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon say that doesn't work to allow you to drink the wine out is not because they don't hold of breira. They hold of breira, and therefore they should say really it works in that case, and you should be allowed to do that. The problem is they're afraid maybe the barrel's going to crack and all the wine will be lost, and you'll never end up taking the meiser and the truma off, and it'll turn out retroactively that what you drank was tevel. Now they said that to Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Meir said, "I'm not concerned that's going to happen. When it happens, we'll worry about it." But he's therefore they really hold that it works, and it's breira, even though it's Tele B'das Atzmai, it works. The only concern is Xera that it may never work out the way that you planned it.